Today we meet Ollie Raison, co-founder of F1 Arcade and one of a quartet who are the forefathers of the social entertainment industry. He talks about his early days of running World Cup events in a warehouse, to then being involved in the smash hit concepts of Bounce, Flight Club in the US, Put Shack, and now their latest venture F1 Arcade, which is taking the UK and US market by storm. Ollie discusses how they built their concepts around true audience insight of competitive socialising, with the emphasis on fun, quality of product, and not too much competition to keep everybody involved. Finally, he shares some smart advice about using AI in your everyday work and silencing your inner critic to enable you to grow in your career. I hope you enjoy. Right, morning, Ollie. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, I'm good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so Ollie is the co-founder of F1 Arcade, which we're going to hear a lot about this morning. So I think, in a lot of past episodes, what's great, first of all, Ollie, is you can just share a bit of your past and your history of how you've got to the heady heights of just opening your latest venture in Washington, D.C. in October, and we'll come and obviously get to there and hear about how you did it.
Okay, for sure. Where do you want me to start?
Where you come from. I think if we keep today, because obviously you've been a DJ and from a radio point of view, but I think it's interesting, this idea of this sportainment, this social entertainment, that you've sort of been a bit of a guru and a pioneer of, and been involved with when people hear this story, a lot of the key things that have maybe defined certainly corporate, but a lot of nights out in major cities across the world for the last sort of 15 years, really.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, I mean, just very quickly, you touched on the sort of DJ thing, the radio thing. So I actually did not go at all down the route of wanting to be a radio DJ. I got into that because I was doing comedy in Perth in Western Australia, sort of 20 years ago now. And because this is kind of the way I've always worked. There was nobody doing the stuff that I liked, and I liked a lot of the English stuff and a lot of the surreal stuff, Idiots Are Mighty Boosh, all those kind of things. So I was just like, well, I'm going to do it myself. There's an audience here. I'm going to do it myself. So that's what I did, and it kind of took off and did quite well. That led to a job in radio, and the reason why I kind of mention that it's maybe important is because the work is not so different to how I would sort of work on a sports entertainment, social entertainment, competitive socializing thing. It's always about the audience, and it's always about entertaining as much of the audience as possible. So the way that I got into, I think now kind of globally, it's kind of called competitive socializing. I have to say that's not necessarily a name that I love.
Yeah.
Because I think as soon as you stick competitive in something's name, you really start limiting who it's going to be properly appealing to.
It could put off quite a big chunk of people, couldn't it? Just without wanting to even discover more.
And look, I'm a fairly competitive person, but I would be put off going to something that would be called competitive socializing, because my assumption would be it would just be like sort of a bunch of alpha males going head to head in this sort of arena of doom that happen to have beer and pizzas attached to it or something like that. So I've always liked the term sort of social entertainment, and so the way that I got involved with it, there's a little bit of a backstory about how I got into it. I can
Please.
give as much as I can as quickly as possible. But in 2010, which is now 14 years ago, I happened to find myself home managing a warehouse space in Dalston. Now, I also lived there. There was two of us that lived there. We had 3,000 square foot of space. We were right on the canal. It was a very loose time in London life. It was a very loose time in Dalston life. We had a very great relationship with both the local police and the local council, whereby we would kind of tell them what we were doing. We'd say, okay, we've got an event that we're doing tonight. It's got 300 people. These are the security that are coming. We're going to be selling our own drinks. This is the time it finishes, all that kind of stuff. And they would just let us do it. We weren't licensed, anything like that. It was just, they would just let us do it. So when I joined the warehouse, the first thing I did was this thing called it was 2010, it was the World Cup was coming up. I wanted to do the World Cup warehouse because we were right in the canal. It was like a great spot to watch the World Cup. So I did, and I went online. I said, what is London's biggest screen? And I found it. It was 12 foot, and so I built a screen that was 12 foot 1 inch. Now we have London's biggest screen. We
Sorry, you were saying you didn't like the competitiveness here, Ollie. What's going on?
No, I do like competitive. I do like to be competitive, but it's more about with myself or just sort of proving a point.
Yeah.
That's the level of competitiveness I like. Point proving has been a big drive from my life.
I told you it was therapy.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about that. World Cup Warehouse. So we did this thing where it was like, bring your own drinks. It's just a £5 to get in. And for some of the bigger games, we were having like 100, 150 people show up. We started doing like street parties out the front because we had like this, we were on the canal, our road was blocked off. So we could have barbecues, music, bands, all of this stuff. We just did them. We didn't ask permission, we just did them. So for every like Italy game, Germany game, we'd really tap into that local community of those people. And it just became this really good thing. And so when World Cup Warehouse had finished and I was thinking, right, what we're going to do next? And I was doing the dishes. And for some reason, I was thinking about Angelina Jolie and Jennifer Aniston and how I just don't think they would get along because of the whole Brad Pitt situation. I mean, this is 2010. I think they've got over it by now. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if they could just battle out their differences over a game of table tennis? And then I started thinking, well, yeah, that would be quite good. Like, we could do celebrity table tennis, and everybody could come dressed as a celebrity. And if you've got beef with like, the celebrity already has known beef within the world, we'd put those two together, and whoever wins, that is the winner. So if Angelina beats Jennifer, Angelina, you won the winner. And because loads of celebrities didn't have beef with each other, when people arrived for this event, I would tell them on microphone, like, why. So my friend came dressed as Prince. I would tell them why you've got beef with Michael Jackson, and then they'd have to battle it out on the ping pong table in celebrity table tennis. So celebrity ping pong went really well. The next Monday after that event had happened, I was like, I want to do that again, but I also don't want to ask people to dress up every single time because that's an absolute ball ache.
Yeah.
But I do want to do something around table tennis. Like, that was really good fun. It was in a warehouse. A shitload of people came, and it was just good fun. So came up with this kind of idea called the WiffWaff Brothers. The WiffWaff Brothers was me and my friend Jamie and another friend Jake. Jake was actually the guy who'd taken the warehouse on in the first place. And all we did was create this backstory that these two brothers had sort of lost touch with each other from birth and had travelled the world, but both somehow had been really interested in ping pong and stuff like that. So they'd now come back together in a warehouse in East London to sort of spread the gospel of ping pong, spread the gospel of good music, fashion, great cocktails, all that kind of stuff. So that's where that came from. The WiffWaff Brothers was born out of a warehouse in Dalston, and it was very, very debauched table tennis from sort of 8 o'clock at night till 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. We did it every Friday. I set up like a booth so I could do some DJing, had a microphone, had like a little slot in my DJ booth for a bottle of whiskey, because essentially what I didn't want to have happen, because we some weeks we might have like 150 people show up. I didn't want this to just be one against one table tennis all the time. It wasn't all about that. So after doing this for a while, I realized that this is more about entertainment than it is about sport. And I was doing these games where like 20, 30 people playing at once. I'm on microphone. I'm just quite drunk at this stage, like a couple of hours in. We're just making things up as the night went along. And yeah, it was really, really fun. Like, as you can imagine, I mean, I wasn't super young at that stage. I was still probably like 32 or something, but I've always been a child, so it doesn't really matter.
It worked well, yeah.
Yeah, but it was through doing WiffWaff Brothers that I first got in touch with Adam Breeden, who was my CEO, and is his first kind of foray into the hospitality world was Lonsdale in Notting Hill, which is like the first kind of really high-end cocktail kind of pub thing.
Yeah.
He then did All Star Lanes, which was sort of premium 10-pin bowling.
Yeah.
and he was looking to do a ping pong concept, which then went on to become Bounce in 2012. So when I first met him, it was 2011, and I met Dom and Adam in Notting Hill, and they told me about the concept. And at this time, Bounce was still very much going down the route of being more of a members club for kind of city boys. So when we first opened Bounce, there was like places for people to shower and all that kind of thing, because they kind of thought that it's going to be really serious ping pong players coming down in the lunch breaks to kind of do all this kind of stuff. So when I met with them, I kind of explained, look guys, for the last year and a half, I've worked out how to turn table tennis into an entertainment event, where it's not always about the best people, because as soon as you make something about the best people, you alienate everybody else who's there. Like, there is a world of competitive and professional sport, that's great. But in the world of socializing, you just don't want to focus always on the winner.
Sorry, Ollie, their idea was then a bit like a squash club or paddle club that everybody goes to now, that they were trying to, their first iteration of it was, let's make it that about ping pong.
Yeah, so the first, Bounce was, it was that to start with. It was really, it's combining the sublime with the ridiculous. Like, watching a bunch of London people, even though they think they're quite good, play table tennis, where they're just flapping at it wildly, it is kind of ridiculous. But the foods that Adam was putting together, like, we launched with like a really, really, really strong menu. The whole idea was that you could go to any of our venues, especially Bounce at the start, and have as good a meal as you would anywhere else in London, and the same with the drinks and stuff like that. So it was really moving away from what people's preconceived notions of what a ping pong club would be, where it's just like sweaty men in shorts, and there's like pints of beer, and there's just like crappy McCain's pizzas just strewn everywhere. Nothing wrong with McCain's, sorry about that, McCain's, but you know what I mean. So and that was the first kind of that's always been, just to go slightly off topic, but that's always been one of the things that when we open a new concept, we're always entering into a market where people assume to know what it is before we open. People just they just think they know what a ping pong club is going to be, or they think they know what Flight Club Darts is, or Putt Shack, or Swingers, or whatever else. But it's not about that. You're not trying to make a sports centre for that activity super fans. You're trying to take it away from the super fans, repackage it, and give it to everybody else.
With that driver being entertainment and fun, that happens to be around a potential sport, if that makes sense.
It's so crucial, like, you can't really lead with the sport. You have to lead with how you're going to make people feel. And if you can attach humour and pathos and emotion to a group of people playing table tennis, you're absolutely going to win. So the way that I was able to take what I was doing at the WiffWaff Brothers over to Bounce, which we did for a number of years, really. Obviously, for Bounce, I couldn't go on the microphone and do the whole venue because it was 17,000 square feet, and not everybody's going to see me. And who would want that? It's too much. It's too much. Too much me. So what we did was I took that experience and we offered these things called premium bookings, which was basically me and then my team further on. We would show up to a group, quite often a corporate group, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people. And I would take them in an hour and a half or 2 hours through a series of super, super light-hearted games that were just designed to make people laugh and be entertained, and not to feel the stress or pressure of the embarrassment of not succeeding. So that was like a real big eye-opener for all of us, really, that if you're not attaching, like, because anybody could open a bar and put some ping pong tables in it. Anybody can open a bar and put some dartboards in it, or that kind of stuff. If you're not learning how to turn the activity into an entertainment source, it's never going to take off. It just won't.
Yeah. And when do you think it clicked? 'Cause obviously, you took over. Go back a bit again, and you took over this big warehouse. Did you have a was that just one of those things in life that it happened, or did you already have an idea that there is something out there? I need a space to try to experiment. Because I think people are always surprised how businesses evolve and grow. It's not always got, and I don't mean to be rude to you or to myself, because it's not always got a major strategic plan. You start somewhere, you jump onto then what works. So what was when you're suddenly thinking, I've got this 3,000 square foot warehouse, how did that journey go?
So I'll tell you how I found the warehouse.
Yeah. Please.
It's like it's a proper sliding doors moment. So going back to 2009, and I was, well, actually, let's do 2010. In 2010, I'd been seeing a girl in 2009, and she'd broken up with me. I have to admit it now. But I was like quite depressed and stuff. Not just about that, but just about a bunch of other things. And I had been invited to a party at my friend Rohan's house. Rohan at the time was a chief political advisor in the Cameron. It was a pre-government actually.
Pre-government, but
yeah. Just say I'm not a Tory. No way.
No bring politics into this podcast. Yeah.
No way. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go to this party, but I knew that the girl was going to be there, Sophie. So before I showed up, and I think I just like had a few vodkas just to kind of
Dutch courage. Yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, I got to Rohan's party. I was so sort of nervous and full of vodka that I ended up sort of holding court with all of Rohan's conservative mates, who ended up sort of sweeping me into Soho, to Soho House, and I was very, very inebriated at the time, and I remember like sort of stumbling downstairs and just seeing out the door the number 55 bus, and in my head it's like, that's my bus. So instead of like going upstairs and getting my coat, my keys and my wallet, and I was at the time I was like couch surfing, I was staying at a friend's, so I didn't have somewhere to stay. Instead of doing that, I just saw that and that was my bus, and I just went and got on it. And then I just was like drunk on this bus, and then I got off where I think I was like sort of meant to get off, and I walked up the road, and I got to the canal I've mentioned before. Then instead of turning right, which is what I should have done, to go back to the house I was staying at, because I didn't know where I was, I went left. And as I walked down the canal, it was like 4:30 in the morning on a Thursday night in February. I was in a little blue leather jacket. It was freezing cold. But I just heard some like really muffled, quiet music coming from like a proper sort of dilapidated warehouse right at the end of Dunstan Road, like Kingsland High Street, Dunstan Road, if anybody knows London. And I just walked into this person's place. There was like 5 people sitting in a semicircle, just chatting. And I just went, I just heard some sounds, thought I'd come in. And that's when I started speaking to Jake. He showed me around the whole place. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I think the next day I went back and like did some like a little bit of painting work for him. And then I just sort of kept going back like over the next month or so. And then one day I was just like, well, I think I'll just stay here, Jake. I'll just live here for a bit. He's like, yeah, okay. So I just stayed on it like a really busted up leather couch for a few months, and then finally sort of built myself a room in a corner. That's how it happened. It was not like any kind of entrepreneurial thing, but I've always put on a lot of parties and done that kind of thing. Like even when I was living in Australia, and I would always do a really big spectacular theme, even if it was a house party. I had to make sure that there was just loads of things for people to do. I wanted people to like be talking about this for like months afterwards, not just. So yeah, that is how it came to be. Like it's just because I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a money person. I don't understand how people are, but I am quite good at ideas and then following through on ideas. Like I tend to sort of like visualize something. I'm not talking about like if you visualize something you'll manifest it. It's not about that. It's just I get an idea in my head, and then over a period, I don't put time frames on things, and over a period, it just seems to be that I'm now doing that thing that I thought about 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. So you obviously could get into the psyche of what people wanted without them knowing what they wanted, if that makes sense. You obviously, that idea of putting together, because obviously you'll have seen of what worked and what didn't work, and that was a good party, that wasn't. And so suddenly you're building this history. Because I think...
Yeah, which I always based it on, like, if I could always, it's always about, for me, feeling the feeling of the person who's not enjoying it and why they're not enjoying it.
Okay.
Like, you can do things, and that's kind of continued through with all of the concepts that we've built as well. Like, I have this rule of, like, for every 10 people, you're going to have 2 people that are hyper competitive and are just going to, like, go for it. You're going to have 6 people who are like, well, I'm here, I may as well have a good time. And then you're going to have 2 people who are like, why the fuck am I at a ping pong bar when I could be at home feeding my cat and watching EastEnders? Like, why am I here? And for me, that 6 and that 2, that bottom group, they're the people you have to go after. If you can't get them, there's no point doing it. Like, you don't need to look after those hyper-competitive people. They have enough going on in their life that they are well sated for all those kind of pursuits. You have to look after the people who are like, look a bit like they're not enjoying it, and it's all about an energy thing as well. So yeah, it was always about that, like whether it's a party, whether it's putting together a concept, and I think that's because naturally I'm quite a cynical and a bit of a pessimist in certain respects. And I always think about, like, I always think about what wouldn't I like about this. That's where I start. Seems a bit weird to do that, but that's where I do it.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because then you gear around to ensure that nobody's dragging the room down. Then, and I think that's suddenly, like you say, the other guys are already super excited to be there anyway. So you do, you've already, you're giving them the tools to have their great night.
If you look after those people who are going to be naturally cynical, they're going to become your biggest advocates for things.
Yeah. Because they're going to tell that story. I didn't really want to go, and I had an amazing time, isn't it? It's that classic. Okay,
that's exactly it. And like, even as sort of the world of social media grows and everything else like that, word of mouth is still sort of 70 to 75% of anyone's marketing. And now word of mouth online just means your social proof content. What are other people saying about you? Yeah. If you can get people to say, like, I thought I was going to hate it, but I loved it, that's so much better than somebody who says, like, oh, it was awesome from the moment I got here.
Yeah. Because you've got the bit sorted, obviously, from all of the bits we've talked about, and we'll carry on. It's like a Billy Connolly sketch now. We're going backwards and forwards. It's great. We'll get to the end by about an hour and a half. We'll be there. We'll be at F1.
The weed.
So yeah, because I think it's interesting. So you said you're not an entrepreneur. Obviously, I think some people would argue to some degree, but let's not worry about that. So have you then found, you mentioned about meeting Adam, have you then naturally put a team together that brings all the skills that are required to build a successful business?
So yeah, working with Adam, I mean, Adam is just, he's probably the leader in the world in this space at the moment, really. Like, and he just has such an incredible strong drive and brain for what is going to make these things work and what's going to get investors interested. And so for me to come on board with him, I always sort of see myself, it's probably a bit more than that, but I always sort of see myself as the 1%er, like the sort of secret sauce, secret weapon, who my background is in comedy and radio and performing and creative things, and you don't get a lot of people with my background in hospitality. Yeah. Like in the UK especially, I was close to being swept up into the advertising world, and I was really resistant because it sounds really weird because advertising's in a completely different world now, but I'd lost too many good friends to advertising. Yeah. Too many good minds, because you get these really, really great creative minds who get seduced by the money that advertising was offering, and then they're gone. You've lost them. They're now making the next Tesco campaign. But so the team that we work with, basically Adam's first 3 hires at Bounce, which was me and Diane Jervis, and now also the co-founders of F1 Arcade.
Okay.
And Janique, who came on not too long after, I think she came on in 2013, so she's the 4th co-founder. And we all have a completely different strengths, but we all work together really well as a team. So Diane is really, really strong on messaging and ops and comms and all those kind of things. And Janique is really great with systems and developing all those kind of things. And we also, as a foursome, have always been particularly strong in really detailed customer journeys, over-engineering everything. Like, the fastest we've ever brought a concept to market has probably been F1 Arcade, and that was still 3 years.
Yeah.
Because we just take a lot of time to. We're always working. It's not like we've got big gaps when we're between stages. We're always working, but we just really focus on every single detail of everything we can offer.
Yeah. And is that because you think that the way that obviously the fashionable element, let's call it, of these social entertainment pieces, they fly high and then they settle, don't they? Are you always trying to keep ahead of the curve in that aspect, knowing that either a competitor will potentially do your concept better or differently, or somebody will find the next thing quicker than you?
This is a huge driver for me, like innovation and always being first. I'm really anti-nostalgia.
Yeah.
I don't think anything was better in the. I know it probably was, but I always want to be doing new things, and with a concept like F1 Arcade, because it's so tech led and.
Yeah, do you want to explain? Sorry, we haven't got there yet. Do you want to give 5 minutes on that? Because obviously I was very lucky to go down and see your setup in London, which just the scale of it blew my mind. And I've got some questions around that, which we'll come back to. But yeah, go on, explain what that is so people have got that in their head.
Okay, so F1 Arcade is our I think 4th full concept that we've brought to market. We just launched a concept called Hi Jingo, which is a super tech bingo concept that was launched in Shoreditch in March 2020. I don't know if you remember March 2020. Anything?
Psychologically, again, that's gone.
Okay. Well, the week of our opening, the week of our VIP launch parties was shut down. So we had to close everything down. What that did mean was Adam was able to go back through some old emails, and he found an email from a lady called Amelia, who works at Formula One, who had asked if we would like to pitch an idea for I think a UK F1 hospitality license they were kind of putting together. Now, if we hadn't, if we were still opening Hi Jingo, we'd had to ignore that email because we were.
Yeah, you're right in the throes of this latest venture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like at least a year of like full operational duty for all 4 of us. But as it was, we were able to get onto some Zoom meets in LD1, Lockdown 1, still the best lockdown.
It was, wasn't it? All new and it's new as exciting. It was the second one you'd been there and done it.
I know. I mean, you forget about the sort of just abject terror of not knowing what was going on, but oh, the glorious sunny days. And anyway, it was weird world. But that did mean that we got together onto the Zoom meets and we started talking about this thing. At the time, F1, it hadn't really kicked back into its full popularity again. It was almost really linked in with Drive to Survive and Lockdown, because when that hit and everybody was at home watching it, that show just went absolutely stratospheric. And even for me, that kind of told me that F1, because I've known F1 since the 80s. I was watching F1. I'm not a huge fan. I've had periods of fandom in the 90s a bit, and in the mid 2000s with like Lewis when he first started. But that told me that F1 were looking to start doing new things and moving out of their really sort of old power brand and more into a new power brand. So we put a concept together. We really focused. We didn't want to make an F1 fan zone. We didn't want to make a thing that was just for sim racers. We wanted to create an F1 racing experience that an absolute beginner could get into and compete against a sim racer who's quite good. Like, so yeah, we put the concept together. We took it back to F1. They liked it so much that they ended up giving us something like a 23-year license, which has expanded to a global license.
That's crazy, isn't it? It's such a global brand that everybody knows, isn't it? You think but obviously you obviously pitched a great idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems so wild now. Like, in a way, I mean, we were confident about what we were doing because we'd sort of concepted from scratch the other ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're sort of a little bit naive looking back on it, that we went in with this thing. We told F1 we're not going to make an F1 fan zone. We're not going after F1 fans. Like, but we were like, we know what audience we want to go after. We know we need to get to people who are just looking for fun. They're looking to socialize in a beautiful environment, do an activity that's new and really engaging, really sticky. So to their credit, they just saw the benefit, and yeah, I enjoyed those pitch meeting when you're just on a video call. It's it's really kind of fun.
And so you've brought all, from what I could see and from what you've explained earlier, you've sort of brought all those elements to what technically could be an arcade if someone saw it, but what is about 70 in the London ones, about 70 actual simulators that you can drive and experience exactly right. With movement and sound and scariness and everything in there. It's brilliant.
Yeah, we worked with a sim manufacturer called Fisaro, who are one of the leading sim manufacturers. We went and visited them a few times in the lockdown breaks. They're based in Kent, I think, and they made us a really, really great looking sim, like the full motion, all that kind of stuff, and big wide wraparound screens. And so when you're actually sitting in the car, did you have a race when you went down?
Yeah. I had to go.
It really gets the heart thumping when you.
Oh, it's scary, and then you can feel people watching you, and you're thinking it was amazing. I couldn't. The thing for me is I couldn't get across over the scale of the place, and like you say, there are areas to play, but then there are loads of areas to eat and drink, and full. You've got the restaurants and everything, with the chefs, and it's like you say, the idea of going 10-pin bowling when I was a young teenager, couldn't be further away from conceptually, could it?
Yeah, exactly, and so it is all about that scale. We want to give as many groups as possible the chance to just sort of escape for a few hours whilst they're with us. Mm-hmm. And if you make everything just really nice, then people aren't going to focus on things that aren't nice. So we wanted to make sure that the racing experience. This was a big thing. I was the only person that had done any sim racing when we were first talking about this, and I said, look, I can see the potential, but I have to say it does suck. You need at least 20, 30, 40 hours in these things to get to grips with what it actually is like to race a simulated racing car. We need to work out how we can get a literal first timer into the seat of a fully powered F1 car. They're actually going to be able to get it around the track. Mm-hmm. So that was like the big kind of thing at the start, was just, this has to be really, really sort of acceptable for just the first timers. Because if you turn them off, you're done.
Yeah.
If we just got after sim drivers, of which, what are there? 0.001% in the UK. It's like, it's just not enough of an audience to build a business around. So yeah, big scale. We always take central city locations. That's because for us, Monday to Friday in the old world, sort of Tuesday to Thursday in the new world, is corporate trade. It's not all about your Friday, Saturday, Sunday social trade. Most of your revenue comes from that kind of time, your corporate trade. So you want to be somewhere where you're in amongst businesses. You don't want people to be like traveling all the time to get to you.
You remove any of that, I can't be bothered, I've got to go in type of thing. It's there on
exactly,
doorstep.
Exactly, yeah. Beautiful locations. I mean, the one in the F1 Arcade in London overlooks St Paul's, and there's a private room at the back with the whole window just overlooking St Paul's.
Yeah.
So if you're into old buildings, that's great.
Bit of old and new in the same room.
Yeah. Really, really, really great menu that's been poured over and thought about, and the whole team goes to the tastings and things like that. So there's a consensus, and then with the drinks menu and just everything. You just want everything to be really, really nice. That's what it's about.
And you've got obviously you've got a private room in there. So if they wanted to, is that so you can do these similar things to go way back to the warehouse where you could potentially compare someone's event, if that makes sense, because it's shared on the screens, isn't it, above? If need be.
We actually do that now. We do have the private room, and we do have a lot of those things that are hosted, and tournaments can be hosted, and really light-hearted hostings as well. Like we use comedians to do it, so we've got comedians working for us. So they're structured, but they're also funny, and they're gonna take the mickey out of people.
Keep everybody involved, even though they're not driving themselves at the time.
What I don't want to get to in any of our venues is this feeling of like it just being hosted.
Yeah,
I don't want just an MC on a microphone, just like welcome to. It's just what's the point? Like, how can you make anybody feel something if you're not asking them to think about something?
Yeah.
We opened the first one of those was London in St Paul's. Then last November we opened Birmingham in the UK. Then in April of this year we opened our first US site in Boston. We opened Washington DC, which is the biggest one we've done yet. I think there's 83 sims in Washington. I was over there for the launch. I really loved the venue. Really high ceilings and just a really expansive space. So it just feels, even though it's so expansive, it feels very warm and welcoming because you can just hear just groups of people cheering.
Noise,
it's nice. And then next year we've got I think Philadelphia and Vegas and a few others coming online in the States. And I think the plan is by 2027 we'll have 35 globally.
Wow.
With the view to sort of getting to 200 or so in the next sort of 5 to 10 years.
So I'm assuming,
arcades. Yeah,
that's amazing. It's an amazing story. I would encourage anybody to go and see it. Because two questions. One, I'll come back to that about that growth. But in terms of the pattern of a night, of like you're saying, of a week has changed of how since post COVID. And I suppose it's interesting, isn't it, when you can offer it's not the cheapest place to go, but the value you get, because I think what people are choosing is when they do go out, they want to get absolute quality, don't they, rather than just, I'll have a few drinks down here or a bit of dinner here.
For sure.
So do you think that concept of where you are sitting in that market, this social sports entertainment, is actually playing perfectly to this new market of how it's evolved post-COVID?
I mean, if we were to sort of, if the economy hadn't suffered post-COVID and we weren't in the situation now with like people really needing to sort of look after what they spend, it's a completely different story. Because what actually happened in COVID with our businesses, so Bounce, Hut Shack and Hi Jingo, previously to COVID, we would have like days where we were super, super busy, but then a Monday or a Sunday or a Tuesday might be quite quiet. But because the government brought in all those rules about you could have X amount of people in your venue and everything would be like regimented how long they could stay, it turned out that for all of our venues, we were just completely full as much as we could be for every hour available.
Brilliant.
So that actually brought in a whole lot of a new audience, because people who had been very used to going to pubs or restaurants, and now you had to like sit in your chair and get somebody to take you to the toilet if you needed to go and all those kind of things. It just wasn't, there was no way the pub experience, but you could still come to one of our places with your group of friends, and we had the space that you're allowed to like work in that space. So we actually generated a huge new audience from that time as well, which then has kicked over to post-COVID, where so many hospitality venues now are like, if you're just doing F&B, you either have to be beyond exemplary or you have to go down the fast food route. Like all the casual dining spots really are suffering because people are expecting more
There's just
now.
not enough. Yeah, there's just not enough. Is there? Yeah.
So, um, yeah, it is a tricky one because obviously we need to price ourselves um, to the point where it's going to generate the revenue we need.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to understand that there is a cost of living crisis, and what we don't want to be seen as is like a special event venue.
Yeah.
We want to be used regularly. We're trying to implement as many things as possible to build communities within our space. Yeah. What was the question again?
I think you've answered it, just like how obviously people's habits of going out. They want to make sure when they do go out, it's good. And I suppose
exactly.
Part of what you're doing is that, isn't it?
Yeah. So the trade changed as well because pre-COVID, everybody's in the office Monday to Friday. Basically, everyone's business was down on Monday and Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, people would start coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, you get just Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are just so heavily corporate. Absolutely packed. Mondays, everybody works from home. Fridays, everybody works from home. So those after-work drinks on a Friday are just... Not everybody works from home, but it's just nowhere near the levels. And it's nowhere near the levels. It's people's expectations of what a night out have changed. And with Gen Z as well, like I think that the figures are it's around 30% of Gen Z Londoners are teetotal, like just don't drink. And I mean, if you look at Gen Alpha now, like the oldest Gen Alpha is 14 years old. It's only going to be 4 years or bad parenting before they're starting to get drunk as well.
Exactly. I think they'll be back onto it though, won't they? They'll be like, "Oh, come on, we'll be cool again."
Yeah. After a couple of wars, they'll be so shaky they'll have to.
Yeah, like we'll need it, like we all did, a bit of Dutch. So, in terms of when you first kicked off for the warehouse, it was obviously you had the space. I'm sure you invested in your 12-foot screen, but it was a DJ.
We built it. Everything was built from scratch. Yeah.
So you're doing that, and now you're obviously gone to this concept that needs, I'm assuming, external investment to grow. How has that changed? How's that changed having sort of a finance expert involved with what you're doing?
I'll answer this the best I can. This is definitely not my world, but I'll answer it the best I can and the bits that I know I can talk about. I mean, Adam has said that one of the hardest things he's had to do in his life was raise. I think we raised 18 million during lockdown. And for him to do that raise during COVID on a concept that had no...
On a socialising, meeting people concept,
Yeah, we raised on a deck, and obviously our previous concepts, but we raised on a deck. And so that was like, he says that was the hardest thing he's had to do. But we got there through a combination of like a lead investor and then like a bunch of friends and all that kind of stuff, or family investment groups and things like that. I think actually also like everyone believed in it so much they did actually take a small equity share at the start.
Yeah.
So they had buy-in from the very start. The next kind of raise we did was June last year, 2023, and that was for 30 million, I think, and that was to fund a further 3 sites. And I think Liberty Media, who is the parent company of F1, actually took a big chunk of that as well.
Yeah.
So that further gave us insights that we're into the right thing.
That's a ringing endorsement, isn't it, from a partner, that they've realised you've hit on this perfect balance between promoting the sport but also building it to a much wider audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that was like, we'd only been sort of training for 7 months at this stage, and for that kind of ringing endorsement, I mean, Adam and Jonathan and Tyler did such a great job of. I mean, Jonathan is our CFO. He's the global president as well. Just did such a phenomenal job of that. And then the last thing that we did, which was this year, was a debt raise to fund. We're fully funded now for as long as we need to be.
Brilliant.
So
that's good. So I mean, if that's where the team works, isn't it? If you've got a team that's squared that off, that doesn't drag you and your creative teams into how you evolve and develop the concepts. And it gives you that freedom. Hopefully, it gives you that freedom still to not only deliver F1, but concepts of it as it goes around the world.
No, exactly. And we've now got some really great people in place. The team is going from strength to strength all the time. Obviously, like the four of us who have worked together now for the last 12 years, we know each other so well. And because we've owned and operated, we all have like this certain expectation, and we all work really fast and hard as well. And quite often, it can be tough for new people to come in and immediately understand what that level of expectation is, because we're not mean or nasty people at all. We're just very fixed on a goal.
So people are given the freedom, but maybe but also the trust. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly right. It's the freedom and the trust, and a lot of the brand values are really sort of presented to people from the start. But I mean, things about brand values and things, it's everybody needs to embody it and live it. Really, otherwise it's just words on a page.
But that's coming, I suppose, interestingly, from the four founders of you guys, and the potentially as you stretch across to the States and I'm sure into Asia and Australia. You're going to have to find a way of not quite writing it down, but allowing that to be passed on, isn't it? Because otherwise, that's obviously part of the magic sauce that you talked about earlier, that is making this concept as you go from each one work. So he said it's a fabulous challenge to have, because obviously you've got it worked out. It's just a case of then articulating it, that people can buy into it. Yeah,
exactly. And as the team grows larger and larger, and messaging goes down chains and things like that, and it's having the ability to let go of areas as well.
Yeah.
And it's not, sometimes you can let go of an area and then detach from it.
Yeah.
And that's not right. You can let go, but not just like, well, that's out of my world now, because then you, like, when you get back in touch with it 6 months later and you're dissatisfied with something, well, what can you do about it?
I think if you care, don't you? You can't suddenly go, oh, I'm fine with that. But I think that's what's kept things together when you've been running at 100 miles an hour to develop different concepts.
Well, and also the thing is, it's just super fun to develop concepts.
Yeah.
To start with like nothing, or just like the tiny thread of an idea, and then the way everyone in our team works differently, but the way I do things is just have that little idea, and I just sort of let that sit in my head, and then over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I don't write anything down. Just have that idea just sitting there. Every now and then, a little bit will get added to it. I'm just or I'll just shut down a thought like that, and then I get to a point where it's a bit full, and I just dump it into a Word document.
Yeah.
And I've always done that, even since like school and like writing essays and things like that. I can't do anything until it's gradual bits.
Got enough up there, yeah.
Until it's full, like all the ideas are linked, and then it have to dump it out. And previously, before ChatGPT, because ChatGPT, I love that because I can dump 3,000 words or 4,000 words of a document of my thoughts into that and say, can you just tidy this up for me so that a human being can read this? And then it was just like, oh, great.
That's brilliant. Yeah. I love the way that people think that, there's this great buzzword of just say AI, but I think that concept of saving time, and actually because it can do some things better than certain minds, can't it? It couldn't come up with the original idea, I'm sure, but once you've got that kernel of an idea with this bit, that bit, throw in that bit, then it saves time. And it might not be right, and you might have to put it through again, but I think some people just see it as cheating, and it just isn't. It's smart.
It's not. It's the best. It's so good. It's so good. Like, I have asked it just as little testers, give me an idea for this, give me that. Not for anything I'm doing. I'm just like testing it, and it does it, and then I will actually say that is such a generic crap idea. I don't like it. And then it's and it always apologizes.
Which is what it would be, because Because it's interesting, isn't it? Back to your point, it does look backwards. It can only look backwards at the moment. Obviously, watch this space. But that is the idea. It's just going to look at what's been, and you're going to go, oh no, they've done that. That's failed. That's out of fashion now. Whereas what you've managed to do with all of these concepts is just go, interesting. There's an angle there. How do we build the concept around it?
Yeah, exactly. And I am definitely a huge advocate for AI. The time saving is immense. So for me, if I've got that document, and that is like the whole concept would be my whole concept of what I would deliver would be in that thing. That would then take me 3 months to actually get that into a form
to craft that into something you could present.
Because it's out now. I don't want anything to do with it. I just want to there's the idea.
Yeah. Could someone build that for me, please? Yeah. Off you go.
And that it's amazing. Like the first time I put it into AI, and just like I had this thing, and it was like 1,500 words. I was just like, you just put this into I just want a document where I can just send it to somebody who doesn't know me, for example.
Yeah.
And I did it, and all my words are there. It's just, and it's moved the right things to the right places, and got subheadings. And I was looking at it and go, oh yeah, this is my.
Who's this guy? He's really clever.
Yeah. I have actually asked my ChatGPT to start remembering me, and I've asked that when AI takes over to put in a good word for me.
Yeah. So he's a good guy. He's good. He's going to come up with some good stuff. Well, watch this space then. Right, we've massively gone over time as usual, which is a great credit to you. It's a fabulous story, and it's just, I don't know. I think it's lovely for people to understand this. If they went into the St Paul's location in London and just saw this thing, they'd be like, "Wow, this is the most." But they'd not realised that. Well, quite short journey, I think, as well. From COVID to suddenly having these events. So I think that's really fascinating insight. So thank you for sharing that. Quick bit of reflection. We haven't got too much time, but obviously your sliding doors moment is pretty unique. But is there anything that you would advise a young Ollie with now what you know, or would you leave him to find his way?
What would I advise a young Ollie? It's really to always be open-minded, and always just. There's never a bad opportunity. Like, so many people turn things down because it's like not fitting into you just gotta do stuff and strangle the inner critic. That's a big one. That was like one of the first lessons I learned in my sort of aborted university career. In a creative writing course, funnily enough, just strangle the inner critic. And before I mean, it's such a simple thing, but before that, everything I ever did, I would just be like, "This sucks. This is terrible. This is bad."
You'd nearly talk yourself out of your ideas.
Yeah, and everybody does. Like I can see it in my mom. I can see it in my brothers. They'll have an idea. 2 days later, they've talked themselves off the ledge. And you just, what's the point? Like, just work on the idea. Have the confidence. Things will go wrong. Not everything is going to be perfect. Take nothing personally. It's really hard to do, but just always be open-minded. Strangle the inner critic. Don't take things personally. And in the Western world, if there's something that you actually want, you can have it. Like, it's really up to you. Like,
I suppose the key to that is, though, it's there to take if you're prepared to put the hard work and graft in to make it happen, though, isn't it? Because
and also, here's another important thing: if you don't have the skills or the desire to put in the hard work or that graft, well, probably put the hard work in the graft. Finding the people in your tribe who can do the bits that you're weak on, without the others, and without my fiance and whatever else, I'd just be nothing. I'd be this shell of this sort of creative loser just floating around small stools or something. Like I need the others. I'm nothing without the others.
But that's it, and that takes some maturity and reflection to understand that's what success looks like, is actually understanding your weaknesses as much as your strengths, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely,
and then building a team.
And finding those people that where you jigsaw into their life, like you are that piece that completes what they're needing, and they fulfill what you're needing.
Brilliant. Ollie, thank you so much for joining us. I have loved hearing your story, and we will be waiting for our next night out on you very soon.
Thanks,
cheers,
Steve.
mate. Thank you.